And here is a slightly tarted up version of the output of this tutorial. In this tutorial we'll be making the actual frame that you see there, we'll be animating it, and we'll be creating the ocean and the backdrop. The rock ring I added, it was something I had already from a previous project, so it was easy for me to do. So that isn't shown in the tutorial. It's a bit complicated to do anyway, to be honest. So let's go ahead and produce our scene. So let's get started. I'm going to delete my... No, I'm not. I'm going to use my cube. So I'm going to zoom into it. I'm going to duplicate it. Hit escape. And I'm going to rotate X 45. Rotate R, Y 45. And you do that just by pressing the keyboard, and we got these two wonderful cubes. Right, so if I select the original cube that's just called cube, I'm going to go into modifiers and Boolean. The object I'm going to use is cube over 1. You can see there we've got intersect, which just keeps stuff that's inside. And we've got union, and it's union that I want, so I'm going to apply that. I'm going to go straight into, first of all, bevel. Yeah, that's cool. I'd rather use the other type of bevel though, so I'm going to get rid of that. I'm going to go into edit mode, hit the space key and type in BEV. See, we've got bevel, and I can play around with the level of bevel that I've got there. And the reason I wanted to do this is it leaves the beveled edges selected. As you can see, all the beveled edges are selected. And what that allows you to do is to go into the select menu, make sure you've got face select on first actually, go into the select menu and invert it, and then hit the X key and get rid of faces, and you see we have this, which is cool. And now I can go back to the modifiers. I can add a solidify modifier, wind up the thickness a bit. I can apply that. I'm going to go back into object mode. And then I've got a choice. I can add a subdivision surface, which will make it kind of rounded and organic, or I can add a machine type bevel, which I have more control over than the subdivision surface, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to apply that. So that's pretty excellent. That's a fairly complex shape. So cursor to center. Selection to cursor. Just to make sure we are exactly in the middle, which we are, and then I'm going to add something else. Add in a icosphere. Then on the left here I'm going to take the subdivisions down to 1, like so, and I'm going to do exactly the same. We go to edit mode, space, and you see bevel's already come up because we used it the last time. Like that. Should have deselected it all first, excuse me. Control Z, A to deselect it all, space, bevel, okay, maybe I do need to select it all. That's better. For some reason it had everything selected before. That's strange. Okay, going to select, inverse, X, get rid of the faces, back into object mode, add a solidify modifier, boost the thickness up a bit, apply it, add a bevel modifier, and apply that. And there we have two nested shapes, one inside the other, and now let's animate them. So, how do you animate things in Blender? There's lots of different ways, and what I'm doing here is simple animation, very simple animation. So, I want to take both of these objects. I don't want to join them, because if I join them then all sorts of mysterious things will happen and I won't be able to move them independently, for one thing. So I want to right click on the outside one, then shift and right click on the inside one, and I'm going to move them off in that direction now. Then making sure that this here is down at 0, this is our animation timeline, so that's at 0. I'm going to add in an animation tool frame by clicking on animation here, insert, and I'm going to insert location and rotation lock rot. And all that says is that at this point we want to be at that location with those rotation values, and it will do that for both of them. Okay. Then I'm going to go to the end of the animation by clicking the fast forward arrow here, and I'm going to bring it all the way over there, like that. Then I'm going to insert, to start with, just a location frame. Okay, remember we set rotation at the last frame. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to apply some rotation, but I'm going to just select the outside one. I'm going to type RZ300 to rotate it in the Z axis at 300. Then I'm going to take this one here, oops, I need to go back to that one. I need to insert a rotation keyframe. So that's only inserted a rotation keyframe for the outside one. Then I'll select the inner object, and I'm going to type RX 300, so they're both rotating at the same rate but in different directions. And I'm going to insert a rotation keyframe for that one. So now if we scrub this backwards and forwards, you can see that they're rotating as it moves. Now that's absolutely fine, but now what we want to do is we want to set up a camera. And as we can see, our camera isn't really pointing at it, but I want our camera permanently pointing at that object. So how do I do that? I select the camera, go into this little chain thing here which is called constraints, and add a damped track, and the target is going to be the icosphere, and we want to click on -Z, which is rather non-intuitive, but -Z is the axis the camera points down. And so you now find that as it moves, there we go. Now what I want to do is I want to add in a ground plane, or a water plane might be more interesting. So I'm going to add mesh plane. I'm going to take it down so it's below. I'm going to not bother to scale it up for the moment, because what's the next thing I'm going to do? I'm going to turn it into the ocean. So click on your spanner, add modifier, and you'll see you've got ocean down there. Click, and we have an ocean. And we want to make it a little bit choppier perhaps. Like that. Scale up the wave peaks perhaps, but maybe not that much. Smallest wave, 0.001 to make sure we get little ripples. Wind velocity, set it to 60 to give some interesting waves. Alignment, at the moment the waves aren't aligned, which means they don't all go in the same direction, and that's absolutely fine with me. So that's our ocean. If I go back to view camera, and what I want to do is I want to select the outside of the frame, so I've selected the camera, hit the G key from G for grab. I'm going to drop that down like that, and that's absolutely brilliant. That's really what I want. So I'm going to make the surface of this ocean, I'm going to choose a material, and just for quickness' sake, hang on, let's go into cycles render. Just for quickness' sake, I'm going to make it a glass material, and I'm going to take the index of refraction down to about 1.2. Going to make it a little bit green. It's going to be a dull green, like that. And that looks absolutely fine. And now what do I want to do? I want to give this a material. I'm going to give the outside of material, and the outside simply going to be a glossy material with, what do we want? We want some colour. No, not really. Roughness? No, not really. Just leave it as it is. Right, so that's the outside. Inside is also going to be a glossy material. This time I'm going to make it look a bit brassy. So if I render that image as it stands now, you can see it sort of looks like that. Jolly good. Now, for our next step, I'm going to animate the camera so it actually circles this. And there's a very easy way of doing that. You can set keyframes on the camera. So if I go into show hide render view, you can set keyframes on the camera. However, it's not really, doesn't really provide very smooth camera motion. So I'm going to insert something that doesn't render. I'm going to add in a curve. It's going to be a circle, and it's in there, you just can't see it yet. I'm going to hit S for scale, and there's our circle. And how far away do we want it to be? Is the question. That's about right. And now what we do is we select the camera, we shift select the circle, and then we go Control P, and we select follow path. And then we want to move our camera back to the start of the circle, wherever that may be. View camera, and swap it all around so that we're reasonably flat, like so. Now if I run it, and the reason for that slowdown in the middle there is that we haven't set up our curve yet. So if I click on the curve, click on this little curve tool up here, and we can see that we've got a path animation. It's only 100 frames. We want it to be the full length of our animation, which is 250 frames. And now if we do that again, so, and that makes sense. Now the other thing you can do to add a bit more interest is to tilt your curve, and we've already got our curve selected, so if I type in RY and I just tilt the curve like that, and I want to take it out of the water. If we go back there, you can see that our camera actually is not on that curve anymore, so we need to change that. We need to drop it down, we need to pull it back, and you could snap to it, but accuracy is not important and it does take time. So there we go for your camera, and our new camera view is going to be a lot more interesting. Still very smooth. And that's our new camera view. So what we need now is some type of backdrop. So there's an easy way to add a backdrop in using images as planes, and we want mountain panorama or something similar. What we're looking for is we're looking for a long thin full 360 panorama like this, except we don't want it high in the mountains, we want it low looking up at the mountains or something similar. Actually something like that would do fine, or this even, that would do fine. Let's have a look for something that seems to be taken at eye level. Oh, that's even better. That one looks better actually, so I'm going to save that image. I'll put it in my 3D directory. And that's done. So we'll go back into Blender. We want File, and we want Import Images as Planes. D. Well, P for panorama. Okay, now type 90 into the X box, stand it up an end, and to scale it up. I'm going to scale this up a long way. Right, so that's probably not scaled up enough yet, but we'll go into edit mode anyway. We want loop, cut and slide. We want to rotate the mouse wheel so we get a fair few of them. Like so. Click, and we don't really need to slide it anyway, so we click again. And now what we want to do is we want to wrap this around. Oops. Hit Ctrl Z to get rid of that. Select all. I'll move it back there. And I'm going to add in a cylinder. Scale it up, scale it up, scale it up, scale it up, scale it up. Until it's almost as big as that plane. And I should have added it in object mode. Let's go do that again. Object mode, and cylinder, scale, so we're pretty much as big as the plane. And I want to select that. I want to go into our tools. Right, So we're going to add a modifier. The modifier we're going to use today is simple deform, and our origin wants to be the cylinder. And we don't want twist, we want bend. And we want minus, I think it's going to work out as minus 360 from memory. Yeah, I think it is. Minus 360, which then gives us our ring. And we can apply that. We can get rid of the cylinder. And there we go. So, what we want to do now is we want to transform the geometry to the origin to the geometry, and move it into the centre there. We want to scale it down so it's the right sort of size, something like that. SZ, make it a bit taller, and let's go for a camera view. You can see what we've got, and if I turn the textures on, now we want to make this, if we click on tools up here, we want to make the smooth shading so we don't see the lines. And that looks like that's going to be about it. Right, the only thing left to do is to play with our modifier for our ocean. So I'm going to click on the plane, and this is another type of animation because what we've got here is a time value. Now as you step through that time value, the ocean moves, and you need to do this manually, and the reason for that is that Blender likes you to have control over things. So I can hover the mouse cursor over it, hit I with the animation timescale at the front, pull the animation timescale all the way through to the end, and hit something like 10 seconds will do. And we might want to make our waves a bit bigger. Let's have a look. Not too big. And as you can see, we've lost our sky a bit there, but not to worry. The next thing I want to do is go in here, and this material I need to change from being diffuse to being emission, and I only want something like 0.2 on the emission. So if I render that now, you can see the sort of thing that we've got. And what we want to do is we want to change that sky colour to be the same. So it's obviously blue, it's obviously quite bright, it's not quite as blue as that. No, it's not quite as bright as that. Something like that. And maybe if I hit render now, and we won't have such an obvious line. Or maybe, well, we're a lot too bright. So we can whack the strength down actually. Try again. just going to play with this a little bit more. Drop the plane down a bit further. And that will do, I think. So I'm going to render this, and when I render things I usually render to Xvideo Direct, which you can set up by putting in there, and I'm not going to go for a full size resolution, so what I'm going to do is go for a PAL 4:3, and no, maybe I won't actually, PAL 16:9 maybe, that'll be better, and that will do for that. Now I'm going to put it on my desktop. I'm going to give it a file name of SA for simple animation. It's on Xvideo. I could have H.264, we'll leave it on H.264 if you wish. It doesn't really matter. Now I've played with all of this. I've played with the sampling. I think that's too high for an animation. I rarely render anything with more than 60 samples. And if you've got any volume bounces in, you can take those down to 0. Transparency, you can take those minimums down to 2. Diffuse, glossy 4. Submission 12. Take those down a bit as well actually. And that should all help us. Now, reflective caustics we'll leave in, refractive caustics we'll take out, which will speed ourselves up. And then it's just a question of clicking on render and render animation. And we're away. Shall I do that? Yeah, why not? If I go back into camera settings, you can actually set the camera preset to be as if it was taken by a particular camera, and I'm going for a Canon C300, which is one I often use, and which means I need to take the focal length out a bit to get the shot the same, and then we'll go render animation, and I'll see you shortly when it's done. And here's our rendered animation. Now as soon as we look at this we can see that there's a few things wrong with it. I mean, the scale of the water is incorrect, and the water's a bit too glossy, and kind of feels like we're in mid-air, so the scenery around the outside is too far down. So let's go and correct those, and we'll do a re-render. The first thing that's easy to correct is the water scale, and I've got the plane selected here. You can see there's our plane, and what we want to do is we want to go to the ocean modifier, and we want it to repeat 3 times on X, 3 times on Y, and then we're going to scale it right down so that it's the same size as it was. Or thereabouts. something like that. And looking at the wave pattern, it's a bit too random, so I think I do need to use this alignment, something like that, and put it in a kind of diagonal direction, maybe like that. Take away the damping so we've got some extra ripples, or some of it. And drop the wind factor a bit. And now if I go through, we're going to be a bit better. Now, one of the other things that I could do is to put a texture on the top of this, and that's probably going to help a lot. So if I go to the materials, so that now instead of just plain glass, if I go into the compositing screen, now at the moment we've just got plain glass, and if I add in, now there's much better water substitutes than glass. I want to put a little bit of roughness on it, and I also want to add in an actual bump map. So I'm going to put the bump map on there, and a maths node, set to multiply, and the bump's going to come from an image texture which I've had for years. It's a watery sort of wavy texture. Image texture, there we go. And the colour is going to go to the normal. I'm going to open that texture, it's in 3D, I think it's W for water. Water texture, I think that's the one that I want. And we need to UV unwrap that plane, so I'm going to go to UV editing and go into edit mode, select all, go to top view and project from view. Image, image I want is the water texture image, which is like that. I'm going to select all, I'm going to scale it up. In fact, this is the image I was thinking of using, but it will do. Chief grab, go back to compositing again. I want to take this strength down to about 0.2 or 0.3, this strength down to about 0.1ish. And we'll see what that looks like. You can see we've got some variation in the water there at the moment, but not very much. So I'll go back to compositing, take this value up. Re-render. That's a bit better because we can see in the distance we've got these extra ripples in here which weren't in there before, and that's really what we want. So I can hide that. Now if I go into camera view, I can select, come out of edit mode, back into portrait mode, select this ring here, and I can move it upwards like that. That'll give us a bit of a better perspective on things, I think. So let's see where the best place is to have a look at. I think our camera actually wants to go down, or perhaps our object wants to go up. But I think it's going to be easiest for our camera to go down, so I'm going to right click on that, G, go down, down, down. We don't quite want to be kissing the waves. And let's see, let's just make sure we don't go underwater at any time, which we're not. That's good. Now, is there anything we actually want to do to our object itself? And there's a lot of things that we could do to it. But I'm going to leave it as it is, and I'm going to re-render it, and we'll show you what it's like then. So, what did I do to tart up our animation? And here's the first thing, this big square. That in actual fact is a sky that I added, so you've got something reflecting in the water. It's quite simply a imported material, an imported image of a sky. That's the one I used. You could use almost anything, just a picture of the sky taken vertically would do fine. I altered the position of the sun so it corresponds to roughly the direction the sun's coming from in the sky, and let's hide that so we can see other things. Now the next thing I did is I increased the diameter of the ring. Hang on a minute. I increased the diameter of this panorama ring here and increased its depth to make it look further away, basically, with the parallax. I added in this rock ring, which is something I had from a previous project. It's quite complicated. It is micro displacement and all these good things to give you a rock. No real problems finding a tutorial for that. I added a sun in, I changed the angles on the light so that in combination with the sky I was getting good reflections of our wonderful little machine down here. And really that's all I did. So not beyond the scope of yourselves, and have a play around and show me your efforts. So if you enjoyed this tutorial, please like, share and subscribe, and I'll see you all again soon. Thank you very much.
Well, you could subscribe to Arduinotronic, or just go jump in a lake.